Hello and welcome to this edition of World News here on TVP World with me, Anna Kalczyńska. Good morning. Speaking to journalists at a White House press conference on Friday evening, outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden commented on the latest package of sanctions against Russia. Asked whether the measure was directly influenced by the upcoming presidency, Biden described it as an effort to strengthen Ukraine in its fight against Moscow's invasion.
I already decided that Putin's in tough shape right now. And I think it's really important that he not have any breathing room to continue to do the god-awful things he's continuing to do. And as I said, he's got his own problems economically, significant problems economically, as well as politically at home. And so I decided to do everything I possibly could within my power and authority to give Ukraine every advantage it could have to be able to sustain support for an independent Ukraine.
Negotiations regarding the possibility of spending EU money on weapons produced outside of the bloc have been postponed until the upcoming summit set to take place on February 3, 2 weeks after Donald Trump's inauguration. Trump has previously called on NATO countries to ramp up their defense spending to 5% of GDP, and his upcoming second term is being closely watched by Brussels. Poland took over the European Defence Industry Programme from Hungary with the beginning of its EU Council presidency earlier this month. Efforts to finalize the program will continue in the coming weeks, but the proposal to spend 35% of EU money on military equipment produced outside of the bloc will not be discussed until after Trump's inauguration. Poland and the Netherlands have previously expressed support for this proposal, while France, with Europe's strongest military industry, opposes this measure. Thousands gathered across Slovakia on Friday to protest the increasingly close ties between the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Protesters argued that the current government is not upholding European values and is failing to meet the aspirations of its citizens.
The Friday demonstration drew thousands of protesters to the Freedom Square in Bratislava and to the streets of other cities across Slovakia. In an exclusive interview for TVP World given as the protest was underway, media and election expert Rasto Kužel shared his key observations.
Today's demonstrations are a response to a growing dissatisfaction with the administration led by Robert Fico. Protesters here are expressing deep concerns about what they see as the government's alignment with Russia and its perceived erosion of democratic principles.
The protest was organized by the civil initiative Peace for Ukraine, and it is not the first demonstration against Slovakia's current government, or Prime Minister Fico for that matter, but it still stands out due to its massive scale.
This protest will be organized not only in Bratislava, but also in many Slovakian cities and also abroad, for example, in Krakow, Poland, in Prague, Czech Republic. And the common call for this protest is Slovakia is Europe.
In December, Fico visited Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, allegedly to discuss energy issues after Ukraine chose not to extend its gas transit agreement with Russia. Several weeks later, during his Friday address at the Slovak National Council, he implied continued ties with Russia. Fico stated that his discussions with Putin confirmed Russian Gazprom's existing obligation to deliver gas to Slovakia, possibly via the southern route.
I do not even have to go to Moscow to fight for gas. I do not even have to go to Brussels to fight for gas. And I have to sit at home because you love President Zelensky. I do not love him. I think he is betraying Europe and making the European Union make a big mistake by getting away with everything.
Fico hinted at possible retaliatory measures against Ukraine for not extending the transit agreement. But the Slovakian Prime Minister's narrative has been rejected by protesters throughout Slovakia, who emphasize their country's EU membership and associated values.
His visit to Kremlin just shortly before Christmas, it was a scandal. For all Slovak citizens. We are against blaming Ukraine for this current situation. We have to support Ukraine because they fight for us. They fight for freedom and democracy, not only in Ukraine, but for the whole Europe.
The tensions in Slovakia were heightened by Fico's recent ambiguous absence from the country, sparking speculation that he was enjoying a luxurious getaway in Vietnam. This is the third protest against the Prime Minister's December visit to Moscow, and unlikely to be the last one.
With Belarus and Georgia tilting back from EU membership, the European Commission will double its financial support to the country's civil societies, the EU Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos announced at the press conference in Warsaw. The move appears to be aimed at supporting bottom-up initiatives that would counter pro-Russian attitudes pervading the Georgian and Belarus political establishments.
This is the wall of a government building in Georgia's second-largest city, Batumi, where a couple of days ago protesters projected an EU flag. The country has seen a slew of anti-government protests since the disputed election in late October, after the new government abandoned its path towards EU accession. Now the country's independent media and non-governmental organizations will receive a boost from the EU. Increased assistance will also be funneled to Belarus.
We should give more money to the civil society in the countries who are now somewhere in between or out of the negotiating process. So we will double the money. European Commission will double the money for civil society in Belarus, and now, of course, also for Georgia.
The funds are expected to help Georgia return to the path of democracy and pave the way towards the EU. According to a 2023 survey, accession to the EU is championed by 80% of Georgian society.
We are so close to the European Union, and we are so far because our government, which is self-proclaimed, and we captured our state, tried to make a great distance between the European Union and between the Georgian, and they are playing not a Georgia state interest in this politics, but playing the Russian interest.
Belarusian anti-regime movements will receive the extra money amid the upcoming presidential election.
So we need support to our media to confront this propagandistic machine. We need support to our human rights defenders who actually have to defend thousands of political prisoners in Belarus.
The move is deemed part of a larger EU policy.
This decision to channel the money, EU money, towards civil society and media organizations is exactly to counter this Russian Kremlin influence in these countries.
Both countries will be needing profound democratic changes to be considered potential EU members. Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, whose country took over the presidency of the EU Council at the beginning of the year, highlighted that all candidate states must accept the bloc's, quote, common rules. That includes the rule of law, which the European Commission dubs the cornerstone of the European Union.
I'd like to stress that aspiring to the EU is a privilege, not an obligation.
Georgians continue their descent on the streets of the country's cities, hoping for the disputed government to yield. In Belarus, however, the situation is more dire, with the upcoming sham election to be rigged in favor of the country's dictator, Alexander Lukashenko.
The 11th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue is currently taking place in Beijing. British Chancellor of Exchequer Rachel Reeves met with the Chinese Vice President before the event to discuss the economic relationship between the two countries.
As Prime Minister Starmer said to President Xi when they met, it is important that we have an open and frank dialogue in areas, of course, where we agree, but also in areas where we have different views. And following that meeting, it is an important moment in parts communication between the United Kingdom and China on vital economic and financial matters to build a pragmatic and predictable relationship that I hope will yield mutual benefits and support economic growth of both of our countries.
In face of the current international situation, the reactivation of such mechanism for dialogue sends a positive signal to the world, and it's in line with everyone's expectations. I believe that this mechanism of dialogue will not only further promote our economic and trade cooperation, the development of the two nations, but also bring confidence and momentum for the world.
At least 11 people have died in the wildfires that have been raging in Los Angeles County, California, since Tuesday, local authorities say. Winds that were hampering firefighters' efforts have weakened in recent hours. Residents of the Sydney neighbourhood of Newtown are left in shock and disbelief after a local synagogue was covered in spray-painted swastikas by an unknown perpetrator. This incident follows a number of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic graffiti incidents in eastern Sydney in recent weeks. The police were notified about the anti-Semitic graffiti early on Saturday and believe that it was sprayed in the early hours of Friday morning. Australia has seen an increase in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents since Hamas attacked Israel in October 2023 and Israel launched its war on Gaza. The Australian Prime Minister commented on the Sydney Synagogue incident, pledging that the perpetrators will face the full force of the law. The Polish economy holds great potential for innovation, which unfortunately remains largely untapped. That's why the government has announced a new round of funding to boost innovation among small and medium-sized enterprises.
At first glance, this might look like a standard sticker you'd find on fruits and vegetables. But actually, it's a fruit of Polish innovation. Produced by the fresh inset startup, the sticker is infused with 1-MCP, a substance that naturally occurs in a gas form and blocks ethylene receptors, delaying fruit ripening.
We managed to produce or bind the gas in the form of a solid substance, a powder with parameters that allow the active molecule to be released in response to moisture. This moisture is naturally generated by the respiration process of fruits and vegetables.
Now used worldwide, introducing Vider Plus might not have been possible without government funding. To fuel further innovation, the Ministry of Funds and Regional Policy has announced a new round of the EU-funded Smart Path programme, an innovation funding initiative for small and medium-sized Polish enterprises.
Today, the strength of the economy in Poland largely depends on our innovation, which builds our economic sovereignty.
Worth some €300 million, this is the first of 4 editions of the programme set to launch this year, with each project eligible to receive up to €35 million in funding. 4 key areas are prioritised: energy efficiency, digitisation, biotechnology and artificial intelligence.
These are all sectors of the economy that have the potential for innovation, and at the same time there is domestic demand in the Polish market and then in the European market for innovations in these areas.
The minister also announced several improvements to the scheme, including reduced bureaucracy, more transparency and a consulting process for companies at 3 stages of development. Through these and several other measures, the ministry is hopeful that in the next decade, Poland will find itself among the top 10 most innovative countries in the EU.
And that's it in this edition of World News. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more.